You were kind of like the Mr. Rogers of the neighborhood.
Mr. Rogers.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm glad I wore my sweater.
I hate Yeah, that's an interesting shirt. No, but I mean, we have, Gloria, Stephanie, Rana when she used to live there, and they always used to call you first. And anytime my wife has any problems with anything and I'm out of town, it's like, oh, call John.
Oh, well, yeah. I'm glad I can be here, right? Yeah. Community is, at least on this end, is strong, which makes it nice, right?
Do you think people gravitate towards you for help because of your profession, or you think that it's just who you are?
I think both, probably, right? Once people find out, what you do, right, as a firefighter and just a natural helper, right?
What do you appreciate most about what your dad and your mom did for you?
So, growing up there, right, there wasn't a lot of opportunity, right? It's not, your opportunity is to be in the neighborhood or with your kid, with your friends, right? The neighborhood kids but my parents always provided and always tried to make it the best that they could. Most of the time wasn't anything fancy, right? Sometimes the best that they could was, hey, go outside and don't come in until dark, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you learn a lot from that, right? You learn like community can be there for other kids and raise you, and you can learn a lot from other people in the community. You just have to you have to be taught right and wrong.
Yeah, obviously times are different now, right?
Right.
Just everything's different.
Right. Yeah, we
have an abundance of information and comfort, and just the other day, B runs outside and there's like 10 kids out there.
Yeah.
And my wife's like, "Oh, are you gonna go out there?" I'm like, yeah. Let me just finish up something. So she was out there by herself, but she's with 10 other people and a few parents. So it's at some point though, it's like at what age you just let your kids roam around, right?
Right.
So
and
what did you grow up like? I'm trying to remember, because I remember I was probably 6 or 7, and I used to just go down and play street hockey down the street by myself. Like we would just play, no parents around.
I was definitely young too, probably as soon as I could ride a bicycle. I grew up right beside a Catholic school that was my parents' house, a parking lot, basketball court, then the school. And that basketball court was, that was where everybody kind of migrated to. There was a park just behind the school where, as we got older, we could go to. But being in that was our safe space, right? That basketball court, right? So
safe space.
Yeah.
So we use that word differently now.
We do, right? Yeah, we use it a lot differently now, right? It's that was where you would go, right? As a kid, you just go over there. And
so you grew up in a small town, steel town, and gained some autonomy just by playing outside, just as we all did growing up in the early 90s.
Yeah,
right?
Being a 90s kid, right?
Yeah.
And then at some point, I don't know, probably the biggest external influences, right, were Boy Scouts. The influence of my father being not strict, but he was pretty strict, right?
It's all relative. It's strict, probably.
Yeah, in a
according
good way,
to today's
right?
standards, it was probably strict. So,
and then,
but no, it doesn't sound like there's much trauma, right? It's.
So it's funny, right? You start to talk like therapy is a hell of a thing, right? As I say, it's a hell of a drug, because once you get in, like, I never thought career-wise, like, oh, I'm good. That's a whole nother thing to talk about. Yeah. But then once you realize, like, oh wait, kids, life, whatever, the COVID strain, like, I'm like, all right, maybe I should talk to somebody. And so once you get into like your childhood and you realize like, oh, there are things from my childhood that affect me today that I didn't know, and were kind of making me not a bad parent or a bad husband, but also like things that you were like, oh yeah, you could be better, right? It's never 100% perfect. So
what do you mean by these?
So like growing up, I always had a place of comfort, right? Like either behind a couch or under an end table, right? As I would say, that's kind of like, that was like where I would go as when I was young, right? And that was my space, almost like my safe space, right?
Behind the couch.
Yeah.
You would just crawl behind the couch.
Crawl behind there, right?
Okay.
Play, whatever.
And how old were you?
Young,
Yeah.
you know, yeah. And then you realize like, oh, you were there because it was away from whatever, right? Growing up in a family that had no money, there was always some kind of drama over that, right? My parents worked hard, but my mom worked nights at that point because she didn't start driving school bus till I was in middle school. Before that, she was like a short order cook, and then she worked in a grocery store. And so there was never a lot of money to go around. So there was always some kind of drama amongst the parents, right? You know, just that's real, right? And so that was pretty much my whole childhood, right? Like there was never money for anything, right? I mean, we used to go to the food bank with my grandmother to get food. So we lived with my grandmother and my aunt, my dad's mom and his sister. So there was a lot of us in a house, right? A small house, only 4 bedrooms, 6 adults, you know, so it's close quarters, lots of things, right? One bathroom, like that kind of stuff makes for a very hostile house where you look back at it now and you're like, oh, those little things trigger certain things in your adult life that you're like, oh, I don't want that. So then you're like, all right, so therapy, you go to therapy and you're like, oh yeah, hey, yeah, that was messing with my head. And so knowing that, right, it just allows you to deal with it. But looking back at it, like there wasn't a lot of physical trauma. And no physical trauma, right? We had a good life. We did things. We had fun. I was involved in scouting, whatever. You know, it's like you go places and you grow up and you hope that those external influences make you a better person, right?
Yeah. Well, I think you turned out okay.
Thanks. Yeah.
I mean, it seems that way. Like going back to what I was saying about all the old ladies in town.
Yeah.
Just like, God, help me move some wood here.
Broken junk.
They don't sound like that, but you know.
Yeah. Oh, they might.
They might. Yeah. So the Boy Scout stuff, that seems like a good foundation, although
I was a Boy Scout. I did Eagle Scouts, did the Eagle Scout thing, right? Did a lot of cool things. I went to Fort A.P. Hill in Virginia when I was a kid. Thought I was a world away from home. I had no idea I was just going to Virginia, right? I'm like, wow.
Where in Virginia? Is this a place that...
It's a military base, and it's like an hour south of D.C., so it's not that far.
It's almost like Quantico, but...
Yeah, it's down that way, and it was a cool place. It was for a big jamboree where thousands of scouts from all over the world came to. So it was a cool event, right?
Yeah. So once what is the Eagle Scout experience like? How long is it? Is it like a 6-month period where you have to complete X amount of tasks, or how does it work exactly?
So you have back then, who knows what you have now, right? You had a book, and there was different ranks, right? There was up to whatever, I can't even remember. Life was like the highest rank before Eagle Scouts, I'm pretty sure. And then you become an Eagle Scout and you have to do certain things, certain skills. The big thing is you create a Eagle Scout project, something to help the community, right? You see them still happening around, right? People do them, kids will do them. But like I created a war memorial for fallen veterans in Everson, which I grew up in Scottsdale. Everson was literally across the bridge from where I grew up. A small town that had a Veterans of Foreign Wars, bar, and they didn't have like any kind of memorial. So we made a memorial outside, and
Is that kind of like a
service project?
Yeah, it's a service project, but that's kind of like you need that big. It's almost like a senior thesis in college, where it's like you need to have a project where you
I think in high school, right, you got to do something too here, and right, don't you have to have like service craft?
Don't ask me about high school. High school was crazy for me. I was out. My senior year of high school, I think the entire senior year, I had enough credits to do 4 classes a day. So my 4th class was at like It ended at 11 o'clock.
And you were, yeah.
And that was it. And then
Nice.
I used to work at a restaurant every single day to make some cash.
You were one of those guys.
was
The
one of those.
restaurant
And then my cash went to things that shouldn't have gone
yeah,
to.
you're a product of the restaurant industry.
Man, the restaurant industry is, and it's everywhere.
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
like every restaurant. Because I would work at other restaurants in different parts of the, Salisbury, Maryland, Gaithersburg, Maryland. Maybe that was it.
so far.
But
Salisbury.
everyone else I talked to,
The 13th.
the same thing. It's like
13th grade.
Yeah. All right, so that's cool. So did your dad push you into Boy Scouts?
Yes. So he was in it. He didn't.
So kudos to Pops there.
Yeah, he didn't finish to become an Eagle Scout. And so he had a son, and his son was going to be an Eagle Scout, right? And when I was 14, I wanted to join the fire department, right?
When you were 14?
14. I wanted to become a junior firefighter in Scottsdale. That was like I don't know why. I hated the fire trucks. I lived right down the street from a firehouse. I would run and hide under the bed whenever there was anything. Comfort, right? It was my safe space. That's going to be the word of this safe space.
We all need our safe spaces, right? I'm trying to, now I'm like, what's my safe space?
Yeah, exactly, right? So that's what I wanted to do, right? I wanted to be a junior firefighter, they called them. Still have the program to this day back there. So I get involved, right? I want to do it. And my dad's like, look, you can do whatever you want, but you got to become an Eagle Scout first. So,
wow.
And it was either that, or if I would have not been, like if I would have just hemmed and hawed until I was 16, I probably wouldn't have been able to drive until I became an Eagle Scout. So what did I do? I became an Eagle Scout, and we
So when did you become an Eagle Scout? When
I was 14, yeah.
Really? I thought, for some reason, it was more like
no, so
I just equated it to being like an older, like 17, 18.
So most of the time, it usually is later because people aren't motivated, right? Teenage years are tough. So you can do it early, and then what are they called? There's additions to the Eagle Scout rank that you can like add on, or like, I don't know, feathers or some, I don't know. There's some name for them. Okay. The National Eagle Scout Association would probably disown me right now because I can't remember what those things are called.
We're taking your Eagle Scout badge away.
Taking it away.
So you got the Eagle Scout, and so let's go into fire. So how long have you been a firefighter?
I started when I was 14 years old.
So you go
as
ahead.
A junior firefighter.
Yeah, how'd that work? How'd you start?
So you sign up, and you can only do like whatever around the fire station, hang out with the fellas.
Sweep the floors,
glorified cleaning kids, right? But they also gave you some responsibility, and you could do training, right, with them. And they included you just like any other firefighter to a certain degree, right? You couldn't do like interior firefighting unless it was a very controlled situation.
But could you train? You said
you could
train. So you could, because that's a controlled fire where like nothing.
Right. Yeah, you could do the training. So at the age of 14.
But you said you didn't like fire trucks. So
correct.
What? I don't get it.
I don't either. something changed, right? I was a freshman in high school, right? And I think it goes back to what you said earlier, right? The people just kind of your personality, right? So I think at that age, right, my personality was like, oh, I want to start helping people. I want to start, like, I saw an outlet as the junior fire department from other guys that I went to high school with, like, hey, this is a way to do something else, right? And so, and it was a place to hang out, right? The fire station. Like,
you felt cool.
Cool, yeah. Sitting on the bench in front of the fire station.
With like a bunch of adults. Or was that not it?
No, we had a big group, like 17 of us in the junior fire department. So
you had 17 kids sweeping the floors.
Well, yeah, come and go, right?
Yeah,
but there was, so we were a big group. So we had, it was the only place to hang out in town too, right? There wasn't like We didn't have a place, in the fire station. We had PlayStation. We could play Madden when it was just blocks, remember? Yeah. It's like,
1,
yeah. Like that was the thing. So you were like, all right.
Did you start this because of your friends, or did you get interested because of your friends, or were you really, regardless of who was going to be there, you were like, no, I really want to try this out? And maybe other people joined in because they were like, oh, look at John.
I think it becomes both, right? Because you see like, oh, hey, it would be cool to, somebody else is doing it, XYZ, whatever is doing it. And then you're like, oh, this is an interesting thing to do, right?
Man, when I was 14, I was really into video games.
Yeah.
I was really into hockey. Hockey was like my number one thing. I loved hockey. I loved video games. I really liked, girls, as we all
AOL,
all the straight
Instant Messenger.
Oh my gosh, yeah. AIM, Hockey Player 8. That was my first screen name in 6th grade.
Yeah.
So I don't know. There was just a lot going on in Gaithersburg, Maryland back in when would this be? Like 2002, 2001.
Yeah.
But yeah, you start when you're 14. Do you remember when you really started to like it, or when you were like, you know what, I'm going to do this for the rest of my life? Like, I'm going to make a career.
It just became a hobby, right? It was like hockey for you, like, oh, I'm going to the fire station. And then you're like, oh, there's this event going on in town and you're going to be there. And you're like, all right, we're just going to do it. And then we could go on emergency calls. We had to either ride on one specific unit, or we had to wait 15 minutes and then we could drive to the call. And we just helped like roll hose or clean up or whatever. But the whole time you're doing that as a kid, you're being manipulated, right? Like you're seeing things that you didn't have to see and you didn't have to deal with. And here I am as a young man, early development of life, seeing dead people and seeing traumatic injury, and that's all changing it's developing your mind, and you're not thinking about that.
Yeah.
Never did.
Subconscious wiring.
Yeah.
And how do you, that's tough, man.
Yeah. So you're like, all right, maybe, you need to learn. They didn't teach that back then, but you needed to like have a balance and have a way out, right? You needed to, you can't do that, like
how many hours were you doing a week?
A lot. Like that's where I went, right? That was where, I was either doing homework or hanging out at the fire station,
so
right? Because it was
3 or 4 hours a day.
Yeah. Cause it was an opportunity, right? It was a place to go that wasn't at home, and which nothing was going on at home other than people probably complaining about money. And you were with your friends and your parents. My parents, as long as I was at the fire station, they knew I was with responsible adults most of the time. Little do they know there wasn't always responsible adults there, but it's still, right? It was a good experience, right?
Sure.
You couldn't get in trouble either, because if you got in trouble, then you weren't allowed in the fire department.
Right.
So it kept you walking the straight and narrow.
So what happens when you get to be 18 and the idea of college comes around?
Right. That's it. You graduate high school. What's your plan? So I wasn't invited into the audio world right away. So we would do bluegrass jams, right? We would host them second and fourth Saturdays of the month, I think. Something like that. I don't know, it doesn't matter. At a local fire hall. And dad of the band mixed sound for the band, but they needed someone to mix for the opening acts, right? So it was either this guy Jeff or myself, right? We would do it, and then they found out like, hey, there's better people than dad. But they would never just hand over the reins. So then they went and hired an audio engineer.
Wow.
And that guy, Ray, was kind of my mentor then growing up, right? Like he took me under his wing. He had a recording studio. He had an installation business. And that's where I learned how to do audio and AV and everything, right? That's where like, so you're like, okay, you got the fire department thing going on. You got this audio knowledge going on, this music. You're working for a country band where you get fired from one, and you guarantee to your parents that you're not going to go do it again. And then 2 weeks later, you're hired by another country band. And, you know, at this point, I'm a senior in high school, and you graduate, and you're like, something. I didn't really think about this, because what am I going to do now?
Me neither, man.
Me neither. Like, you graduated high school. Did you have a plan?
I know. I was lazy. Honestly, man, I was just smoking a lot of weed.
Right.
I was smoking a lot of weed. So I'd go to school, and then I'd work, I'd hang out with friends, just kind of dick around, man.
Right.
And
the restaurant business.
Yeah, man. But then outside of the restaurant business, even with my friends, like we were all just kind of, the friends I was with were computer guys.
Right.
They were geniuses. They were amazing. And they have fantastic careers now and high up in computers. Right. Good for them. I'm glad it worked out. And it's kind of funny because none of them have a college degree, and they're all like, very well. Anyway. Yeah, I was just lazy, smoking weed and thinking to myself, oh, I'll just go to community college and, blah, blah, blah. So I ended up just going to, I shouldn't say just. So I was going to Montgomery College, taking a few classes, just generic classes, because I didn't know what I wanted to do. Playing World of Warcraft, video games in my mom's basement, like all the stereotypes.
Oh, man, you were going down that path.
It was bad. I was going down. But what changed my life was a terrible event. I went over to a friend's house one night. We were drinking over there. I did the responsible thing. I spent the night there. I woke up the next day, went really hard, woke up the next day, was driving home, and I fell asleep behind the wheel.
Ugh.
Thank goodness nobody was hurt. I didn't hit any civilians. I didn't kill anyone.
Right.
But I fell asleep and I hit a car going head on.
Oh, yeah.
And I woke up. My car was spinning. I woke up. Basically from the night before. I had somebody else's shoes on. I was still
shouldn't have been driving.
No, not at all. And nobody got hurt. The guy hit, I guess, was trying to, he got out of the way. Poor guy. It was like this old car. Yeah. His car was totaled. So he didn't have a car then. Right. But anyway, that really shook me up, because I was like, I remember my mom picked me up. She was
hysterical, not
happy.
Yeah, hysterical, angry.
Yeah. And this was the second car I crashed, by the way. The first car, I was 16 years old, and I thought I saw my friend. I was like, is that Ben?
Smash.
Red light, and it was raining out, and boom. But anyway, I was 19, the second crash, and it took that to really change my life, and just to lay back on the partying, lay back and like, am I just gonna like play video games in my mom's basement?
Right, forever.
I had a lot of friends in high school too that were out at College Park or off at school.
Right.
So I didn't really have friends. I'm going to class. I'm not making friends in class. You're just like going there and going back home, and then what?
It's the community college way, though, right? You know, you think like, oh, we're community college doesn't. I mean, I'm sure there is an aspect of community to it, but a lot of times it's just kids going to school to go to work. Yeah. Right.
And older people that just, want to learn about something or whatever.
Yeah. Non-traditional.
So that happened, and then I started to. Then I was like, all right, step one is just to get out. If I just want to get a generic degree on whatever, let me just get out and get into a 4-year school and get out of my parents' house. Mm-hmm. So it was that accident, that traumatic event. I was like, all right, that's it. So I applied to Towson. They put me on a wait list, and I was like, I can't wait. I got to get out.
I got to get out.
I forget like the timeline, but it was like almost, it might've been September and October, and I was applying to get in for January. I mean, it was like as soon as possible.
Yeah.
And then Salisbury, thank goodness. I love Salisbury so much. I had a great time. They accepted me. So I'm like, I guess I'm going to Salisbury. Yeah. So anyway, so that, and
It's like what? Yeah,
15 years later, 16 years later, however many years now we're here.
Yeah. I mean, it's similar, right? I was making, as I said, music, right? I was working for a band that was playing 6 nights a week, traveling around in a fancy box truck, working at a paint store too at the same time, right? Like, yeah, yay me. Graduated, was sitting at home one day, and my dad's like, "Are you going to college? You should probably figure out where you're going, huh?" And I'm like, "Oh man, what am I doing? I don't know what I'm doing. What school's out there?"
And this is early 2000s, right?
2003.
2003.
Yeah, summer of 2003, I needed to make a decision. I really wanted to go to the Recording Institute of whatever in New York, but I couldn't afford that. Then I'm like, oh, there's a place in Ohio. Go to Ohio. Can't afford that. I'm like, man. Well, there's this place called the Art Institute of Pittsburgh. They offer a bachelor's degree, and it's called digital media production. Find a old Yahoo search back in the day and figure out if I can make it.
But you're like one of the Montgomery County, like you're like the video guy. You're the guy who knows everyone. So you tell me.
I don't really see this, right? I don't see myself as like a guy with the answers. But when you get involved in something that doesn't have like a written place anywhere or a predetermined job description, I guess. So like, look at you, right? You do audio for a living. People hire you. They hire you for a skill, right? When you go what your expectation is. Now they may change it up a little bit, right? They may say, hey, we want to do this, and if you can make it work, you'll make it work, right? You look at AV and what I do, right? I'm a firefighter. My job is to help people at their worst of times. That model of work has been repeated for the same way with a little change really since Ben Franklin started the first fire department, right? Other than the technology, it's still the same premise. But what you become is you're becoming an all hazards response agency. And as we progress in time, there's a need for what we all do what you do full time, what I do on the side. When was the last time you turned on the news station and watched nightly news?
I mean, I don't know if you've seen Stephanie's, if you ever looked through her window.
Yeah, you probably watch it.
She's watching. She's giving the ratings.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely, I think a generational.
Right, yeah.
Like our parents might.
Right.
But like people our age and younger.
Right. So how does the fire department engage with that generation, right? We're losing the ability to hire people because people don't know about us. People don't know what we do. So here I come, John, along with like a little bit of experience in the background, but a desire to get shit done. Right? And so when people present you with something, you're like, all right, yeah, let's do it. Whatever. Never say never until you hit a brick wall, right? And in the fire service, that's different, right? There's a lot of people doing a lot of good work today for managing incidents, a lot of stuff. But how do we keep training the youth, right? That's where a lot of what I do is come into it, right? I'm creating a way, and not me per se, we are creating a way to train people now that doesn't involve sitting at a desk, right? Like that's unheard of, They still want us to get in there and sit and be PowerPointed to death for 8 hours, for contact hours. But do we need to do that now? Right? If you can get contact hours by listening to a podcast.
Sounds like the fire department in general, to generalize, I could be wrong, but it sounds like they just need more creative people.
100%.
Because it's maybe the type of people that, and this is, I think firefighting is a great career and it's very admirable, But maybe the individuals that are gravitating towards that are just like, I just want to like help, and I want to go from A to B. I would just want to do my job. Maybe not much creativity.
Problem solvers.
Problem solvers. There you go.
They're not problem solvers creatively most of the time, right? They're problem solvers based on a preset protocol or policy. You know, I always say we're like, if we're doing a certain job and we have a hammer and that hammer isn't working, we're not going to try to figure out why that hammer is not working. We're just going to get a bigger hammer, right? And we're going to keep going with that bigger hammer, and it probably isn't going to work either. So we're just going to get a bigger hammer. So, you know, that's changing in the world, right? We're at a point where we have to we got to look at things differently. We got to look at creatively, right? Recruitment, right? We can't recruit the same way they recruited me. You know, they're trying that, but it's not really working. So how do you recruit people how do you effectively recruit people who spend most of their time, 8 hours a day on their phone?
Get in that phone.
You got to get in that phone. You got to become part of that algorithm, right? You got to, and no offense, I'm probably not the guy to know how to do that. I can make you content because I kind of know what kind of looks good, what looks bad. But I'm not a social media pro. There's people who are.
Yeah.
So hire them.
Yeah.
Make jobs for them, right? I'm not saying the fire department needs to be civilianized, but I think there's a place in the fire department for people who aren't putting out fires.
You think the police are doing that?
They are.
Yeah.
They have a much.
I think it's.
They've had to.
I could be wrong, but I feel like it's even harder for them to recruit.
Their Sunday actually is a huge event, the Public Safety Day, right? And that's the police department's push to try to make really all of public safety, but it started out as make them not look so much as that authoritative fixture, but as a resource for the community, right? We're really here to help you. The unfortunate thing is there's too much external noise, right? Scroll through X if you still do. Sorry, Elon. Scroll down through there, right? There's always some opinionated person, right? Nobody's ever going to be right. You're never going to be right, no matter what you do. Somebody always is going to tell you the sky's not blue or the grass isn't green. But it goes back to what we said. You just got to do the right thing.
Yeah.
And that's where we struggled a little bit as adults. But I think in general, I don't know, maybe I look at it very narrow focused, but I think we're doing a much better job in that society.
Yeah,
here anyway.
I think it's important to be optimistic. You have to be.
Yeah.
And figure out what the next step is. What just kind of pivoting a little bit.
Sure.
I'm going to pretend to be your therapist for a bit. I'm curious. Well, I think so police officers and firefighters, there's a unique relationship there. I'm interested in that. But I'm also interested, you're a father too, right?
Yeah.
Husband, all that.
Yeah.
Seems to be going very well for you, 6 and 4 year old.
We're surviving.
But, I look at myself and I'll go to work and I'll mic up somebody important or record audio for whoever, and it's great and it's fun and it's interesting, and I get to get into listen to all these conversations of very powerful people, very interesting people, right. Very opinionated people, and it's cool in that sense. You go to work and you are sometimes you're dealing with the worst parts of humanity. I mean, you're showing up when something's going wrong, where there's death, so you're in there for 12 hours or 24 hours, and then you come home to your family. Is there a way you disconnect from all if you have a bad day at work, maybe your kids are your disconnection, where you're you just look at them and focus on them, and it kind of
So it's tough, right? 24 hours being gone, right? God bless my wife. She's a rock star through all this. Why she chose to marry me, we'll never know, right? Maybe she could answer that question for you someday, right? You can't, like, the hardest part of my day from when I come home from work is going into my house, right? And not because I don't want to be with my kids, right? Or be with my wife. That is the best part of it, right? But just knowing that I got to be able to turn off whatever baggage that I might have from the day from that work day. Like, you don't know how it's going to come out of you, right? You don't know, you know, everybody says, oh, I leave work, and I leave it at work. But do you? I could say you don't. I'm not too afraid, too manly to say, I'm not leaving. If you go to work and you deal with a bunch of death, yeah, you might not be thinking about that person or whatever, but it's still impacting your day, right? And so once I get through that doorway, it's fine, right? You're okay. You're going about your business, right? Going in, and you know this, like when you're gone for a long time and your daughter sees you, right? She loves you, where it's like your wife probably doesn't always get that same reaction because they're together all the time. And but for me, that's it, right? And you just getting a hug, whatever, reconnecting, and hopefully that reconnection doesn't have any kind of issue, right? You don't want any screaming or yelling or whatever kids are doing, right? Like, no. And I think that's the easy way to really disconnect, right? Some days, because of my other hat I wear at work, I just go straight from the fire station to other work. So that helps too.
Yeah. What would you say to somebody that doesn't have like a family, doesn't have these, bundles of joy that we call kids? Like,
yeah, some people have a hard time with it, right? But then other people just have hobbies. You got to get out there. Yeah. The worst part is when you're up all night and you don't get to sleep, and you got to come home and you got to be ready to go, right? This, like, you can't come home and be tired. If you got a family, you got to go. What's worse, right? It's not fair to my wife. She just did this for 24 hours, and I come home and be like, hey, babe, I need to sleep for 6 hours. You got to put on your big boy pants and go get it. As I say, some days it's hard.
Yeah.
Not enough coffee in the world.
Just pivoting to fatherhood real quick. Yeah. What's been the hardest part? I mean, I guess it's always evolving, right? It's always evolving. It's always changing. I remember you, of course, you were very helpful. Our daughter was 4 or 5 weeks old, and we were just going on a walk outside, and you like stuck your head out and you're like, how's it going? I'm like 6 weeks, man. Just get to 6 weeks. Yeah. And man, you were so right. Not to say every kid's like that, but once we got to that 6 week mark. But I remember those first
because
month and a half, you're just not sleeping. And you're not sleeping. Once they start sleeping, you're like, holy crap. So that's very difficult. But then there's always, it's always difficult. It just seems to be changing.
I tell Quinn every day when she goes to school, right? Remember, be nice and listen. Like, listen with your ears. And I'm like, not listen, like follow the rules, listen, but listen. Like, and I've had this conversation with her, and then just Quinn's influence on Zoe, as a 4-year-old, a younger sister, right? They just want to be like their older sister. She's very independent in a lot of things, but she does exactly what her sister does. So balancing that elementary school influence at home, that's probably one of the hardest things, right? It's good learning. They're learning every day. Sponges, right? You never know what they're going to tell you next what's going to come out of their mouth. You don't know.
Do you ever think about this pendulum of like happiness and suffering and like trying to I think about this maybe too much sometimes, but I think about how, our kid is such a good life. Yeah. I don't want her to be, I just want her to grow up being strong-minded, strong-willed, all that,
So I had this exact conversation with my therapist, actually, because I was worried that I was like the discipline was going to be bad, right? And I think like, man, I don't want to make my kid like not like me already. And she had some really sound advice, I think, through that, right? Like, they're going to be okay, right? They need somebody to say no. They need someone to not give in all the time. And they're going to be okay. And you may feel that, and it's normal, but it's okay, right? At the end of the day, they're going to remember the happy things 90% of the time, right? Definitely at 3 and 4, they're not really remembering when you told them they couldn't have cookies, right? Or when you said, no, you can't go ride your bike. 6, maybe. As they get older,
But it's still important, you're still setting foundations,
right?
And
they learn right and wrong.
Right, early. They learn right and wrong, and fostering independence, and
parenting is going to be it's going to be a fun ride, right?
It is.
We just got to hold on, and I think you compare your story and my story, right? And vastly different, end up in the same place in life, right? Very similar positions. Careers are different, whatever. But we both will raise our kids the best we can. And it's really up to them to take that information like we did and decide what they do with it. I don't know any other better way to put it. I mean, I can't think of like, hey, how do I make my daughter a good person other than modeling good people? And so I think they're off to a good start.
Yeah. I saw an interesting quote the other day, and this is about parenting. Like, especially when your kids get older, they don't, your kids don't ever want to listen to you. Not ever, but a lot of times they don't want to listen to you, but they will imitate you. Yeah. So even if you think they're not listening, they probably are, and they're also watching you and how you act. How you act with your wife, how you act with other people. And so that's something I always kind of like, okay, well, if she's not cooperating with what I want her to do, that's fine. But she's still watching and listening.
Yeah, so. Just be purposeful, right? Yeah. It's hard. It's hard every day.
We had a really bad morning. It was so bad. Yeah. She just want to get dressed for school. Oh. She's like, I don't want to go to school. I'm like, I know you don't. Mama doesn't want to go to work. Yeah. It's tough, but we got to get dressed right now. Like, I'm crying for 20 minutes, 30 minutes. Like, what is going on?
Yeah.
But tough. just tough days. But I know in 20 years, I'll be like,
not even 20 years, man.
Not even 20 years.
Probably
5-10 years. I'll be like, oh, I'd love to go back to those days.
Probably 5 years, right?
Yeah.
She's 3.
Yeah, when she's 8.
Yeah, she ain't gonna want nothing to do with you. No, she'll still
8?
want it.
Gosh,
I think it's probably 12, 13. At some point, they're not gonna like us. Let's just.
Oh yeah.
Let's just.
I say you have. Let's see, how many more years with Quinny? Like 5-6 years.
Yeah, we'll just 6.
Yeah, you're basically halfway there. Mm-hmm. So you got another half, and
then you lose them for a while.
Then they come back.
And then they come back because my sister tells me, like, you realize, at least she realized that, like, 20, that, hey, she needs her dad even though he's a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
Right? There's some things that fathers can provide that only fathers can provide. So.
Yeah.
We got a harder challenge, I think, than boys, right?
Do you still talk to your dad?
Yeah. Not all the time. Maybe. Well, I talk to my mom a lot more. He's usually in the room somewhere, putting his 2 cents in.
Yeah.
So
how often?
Well, actually having a conversation with him,
Yeah.
only a few times a month probably, but he's part of the conversation a lot.
A few times a month. That's a lot.
Yeah. He's busy now taking care of his brother and my mom because they're both laid up. So he uses the excuse he doesn't want to bother me. Like, whatever. You're not bothering me. What am I doing? If I can't answer, they don't, I'm sure your parents like cell phones. If you can't answer, you're not going to answer. You'll call them back,
My parents feel the same way, though. They don't want to bother me. They don't want to intrude. They don't want to be those overbearing. They don't want to, like...
They're not ringing the house phone.
They will always pick up the phone if I call.
Yeah.
But they want me to always initiate, which kind of makes sense. You don't want to...
But you have a connection with your dad, right? I'm sure he probably still wants to
keep giving me mics every Christmas. I'm like, this mic's from 1992. I don't want it. There's a wireless transmitter that doesn't work. It looks cool though. Sure, I'll hang it up on the wall as a decoration. Yeah. No, it's good. I know he likes talking about it because he misses working.
I'm sure he misses it, right?
He does and he doesn't because he's now. I mean, he's just turned 70. So now he's just he's a beach guy.
Good for him.
He's friends with all these like multi-millionaire oceanfront
hippies
guys. No, they're like real estate rich
boomers.
Guys. Yeah, they're all old. They're all his age, and he's their like fix-it guy. So he just hangs out with these.
Yeah, because he probably knows how to do all the stuff that they
don't. Yeah, they know how to sell houses. Right. So.
I said it'd be cool to start a business. Right. We do what your husband can't.
That's an aggressive name.
It is. I always joke, but yeah, you think, do I have a business? I don't know.
But anyway, is there anything from your father? I guess it's so different. Every like 30 years or so, it's like what's life going to be like in 30 years when our kids are maybe having kids? It's like, dude, I don't know.
So right? It's interesting because like
what transfers from the early 90s to 2024 seems to be like
nothing.
I mean, it's like and I thought about this the other day, like again, overthinking, right? She's going to be fine, like you said, but everything is so easy, and it's so easy to get out of frustration, like, oh, I don't want to watch this part of the movie, so let me just fast forward it, or you know what, I just want to watch a different movie now.
Right. It's so easy to
do, where it was like back in the day you would have to, you go to Blockbuster or something and hopefully they had the movie.
Yeah. And hopefully it was good.
Yeah, hopefully it was good.
Or you just watched whatever was on TGIF.
Or you didn't go to... Right, you just watched and you watched the commercials and you couldn't fast forward, you couldn't skip. So it's just kind of... I know that's such a stupid... It might be a silly example of like television, but there are many other things if you look at life, like how easy it is to just like...
Think about things that influence you right now that may make you do something different tomorrow, right? Because whatever, right? From the gear you use, the microphone, whatever, the clothes you wear, who knows, right? Like we're in this just constant information highway. And I think that's how I can't take a lot from my father because his information highway showed up on the front step on Sunday mornings, right? Like the Sunday paper was where we got our news. No, we got a paper on Thursdays, right? The local paper. That was our information highway. And then Sundays, if we got a Sunday paper, you were like, oh, all right, now we know what's going on in the world other than the nightly news. And, he's a very much like that old world mentality, right? Oh, I come home from work, I sit and watch the news, and dinner better be ready when I come in the door, right? We're not that way, right? We're like, oh, we're going to go make dinner. Mm-hmm. We're making dinner. We're whatever. We're working until we can't, essentially, right? So how do you balance it, right? That's my thing. Like, what do you do with your phone in the evening, right? Like, me, I try to like put it in a different room somewhere so I'm not so attached to it.
I've noticed I've noticed it's in transitional periods where like even if I'm getting out from my car in the driveway Or if when we leave this podcast and go to a different room, we're both going to look at our phones because that's how we're connected.
Yeah.
And a lot of it's kind of necessary because of how I get work and how I make a living.
Right. Yeah. People.
I've missed work because I haven't. It took me a few hours to respond. So
right. Because people are so want everything done right away. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And we see that change, right? Now there's a big push for, less work hours.
Have you thought about going back to the cell phone thing? Have you thought about, and I think we're still a few years away at least, but your kids and phones, or have you
I have
any ideas?
Like, I don't want them to have one, right?
Yeah.
How long can you push that boundary, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy, Paul, which I didn't even think of this, right? I have a nephew and older, and even my coworker my lieutenant at work has a son, 16-year-old, right? And he's like, "Oh, I'm going to take your phone away from you." Kid's like, "Okay." You know what kids do, though, right? If they got a job, they just go over to wherever, buy a track phone. Then they got a phone.
Buy a what?
A track phone, like a throw down, like a burner phone, right? Kids.
Yeah.
So there's an element I didn't even think of. Like, man, my kid can just go get, off the shelf at wherever, Best Buy or Walmart, some, cheap device. And as long as it connects to internet, bingo, no control, right?
Yeah. I mean, hey, if they're going to be paying for their own plan, I mean, I still hate to see that, but at the same time, if you're 16, it's...
But how much do you need a cell phone plan, right? Because there's internet everywhere.
Oh, you just connect to the Wi-Fi. I see
Wi-Fi. Yeah.
Okay, so no plan.
Nope.
No plan. Just like Wi-Fi. And you can chat with chat or whatever.
Do whatever
else,
you want.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Part of that's like some of this podcast stuff is like, hey, if nothing else, it'll just be cool to, in 20 years, look back at like, oh my gosh, look at what we were talking about. Look at what we were worried about. Look at,
Yeah.
Do you have any cool story? By cool story, I mean like wild stories about like what's the biggest fire?
I think in my whole firefighting career, there's only really 2 crazy fires, and they're not even really from my job here. Well, maybe 3, right? Upper Rock, when that apartment building burnt, that was lots of fire. That was like surreal, driving down the road beside that building, and it's just like a towering inferno.
Is this like a 15-story building, a 10-story building?
No, it's 4. So it's the 4th floor.
Still,
Whole 4th floor blazing. So you're just like, all right, that's a lot of fire. What do we do? Well, we do what we do. We put it out eventually. It's 2 options. Put it out or the building burns down. First is you make sure there's nobody in there. Once that's out of the way, well, then it just becomes an urban barn fire, right? You're just like, all right, it's just happening. So that was like wild, lots of fire, right? But go back to when I was 18 in Scottsdale, getting ready to do whatever I was going to do in life. Early morning fire, local bar on fire. We show up, me and another guy are told, hey, there's somebody in there. And it's like really on fire. And I am a young guy, ready to go, got all this training. And the captain of the ladder truck was like, me and you, John, are you ready for this? Time to go. And I'm like, nobody else. Guess we're going. So we go crawling in the bar door, and smoke bank down, you can see fire burning off in the distance, and all you know is that there's somebody in there. Come to find out, you can watch the documentary online, but
there's a documentary about this fire?
Yeah, about the whole situation, yeah. Or an episode of some show or something, yeah. But he was murdered. It was like a weird love triangle gone wrong. He was murdered inside the building. The lady set the building on fire. We just thought he was stuck in there. We had no idea he was already dead. So we go crawling in, and it's hot, real hot, like to the point where Jim, the guy I was with, was like, "Are you good, John?" I'm like, "Yeah, but it's hot."
And you can hear?
When we were talking, it's muffled, right? Because it's hard to communicate, but you can hear, right? We don't have a hose line at that time either, right? And we're trying to push in the door farther and farther, and we're like, man, why can't we go? We're running into all this stuff, bar stools, and so we tend
You're
to
crawling on the ground, right?
yeah,
now?
we're crawling on the ground, and we tend to search right on one salt wall or the other wall, right? So you have a reference point. And so we're staying on the wall, we move over this wall, and then we run into the bar, and we end up right back at the bar stools. Like, we're not going anywhere. Like, what's going on? And it's too hot at this point, right? So somebody brought us a hose line, was like, oh, here you go, put this, thank God. And it probably is what saved us. Now, we're not far in the building, right? We're only probably 30 feet in the building, but it seemed like we were miles into the building.
And it's all smoke. You can't really see.
You can't see anything.
You can't see anything.
Yeah, you can't see your hand. I mean, you can see the fire burning, and you know that it's the fire's on the back side of the bar, and it's getting bigger. And so the reason we couldn't get past those bar stools is she essentially created a barricade of bar stools around him. So we just didn't have it in us anymore, right? This is only like 10 minutes of work, but you're working in hot heat, The helmet's hanging on my garage, all charred up, the front's burnt. Like that was it, right? That was like my early time in the fire service. And that was one of the craziest things I ever did, right? You're just like, what in the world?
So did you see, when did you notice the body? And
so nobody could find the body initially. Jim and I came out of the building.
did you check? So you get the hose and
Yeah,
then
we
you start.
started to put a fire out, but then we needed relief, right?
Yeah.
We were running out of air. So we come out of the building, change cylinders, go in to relieve the crew that relieved us. They hand off. They made the push. Other people were putting the fire out from the other side. So conditions started getting better. We get in there and we realize, oh, hey, there he is. Then it just becomes a whole ordeal, right? And
Yeah.
just back out, go around.
Because at that point, it's so what do you do when you? I would imagine that's not the only time you found a dead body in the building.
No.
So when you do find the bodies, what do you? What's that?
So
what do
if you I've found a few people who were not you can't really save them, so you just go. It becomes a criminal investigation, right? A homicide. So you just have to leave them there. People that may have a chance, you carry them out. I pulled a guy out of a basement who we thought was going to live, but he didn't, right? And we've also saved people who've closed their bedroom door and, we're okay, right? Sometimes you just shelter them in place until you can get them out a window, get them down the steps, whatever, so it all depends on what the situation is, really, and how dire really it is, like, to get out. Most of the time we just want to go. Like, it's not doing you or I any good to be in there, so let's get out.
It was fun, man.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. I'm interested to hear how it all works out.
Oh yeah, dude.